He was a billionaire who could buy anything, except her attention. Every Thursday, he sat in silence just to watch a quiet blonde librarian shelve books. He never spoke, never asked her name. Then one day, she vanished. No note, no goodbye, just gone, and that's when the man with everything finally lost something he couldn't replace. Everyone knew his name. Braden Cole, the golden boy of Wall Street, turned tech mogul, turned Forbes regular. But few knew the truth behind his strange Thursday routine, because every week, without fail, Braden disappeared from boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, and walked into a small, aging public library just outside of Bridgewater. He never spoke, never borrowed a book. He simply wandered the aisles, pretended to read, sat in the corner seat on the second floor, and watched her. Not in a creepy way, more like a quiet reverence, as if watching her put books away and brush her hair behind her ear was the most sacred thing in his entire world. She was nothing like the women who usually circled him. No red carpets, no designer heels, no hunger for power, just cardigans, worn-out sneakers, and paperbacks with little notes in the margins. Her name, nobody knew, not even Braden. He never asked, because for years, all he wanted was the quiet escape she unknowingly gave him. In a life full of sharks, she was the only soft shore left, and then, one Thursday, she was gone. No closed sign, no announcement, just an empty desk, where her smile used to be. Braden waited. He waited a week, then 2, then 4. He returned every Thursday, like always. But the seat stayed empty, and so did something inside him. See, Braden didn't believe in fate. He believed in strategy. He didn't fall. He calculated, controlled, always one step ahead. But this woman, this librarian, he never even spoke. Two had dismantled him in silence, and now her absence was louder than anything he'd ever heard. At first, he told himself she transferred, took a vacation, got sick, but deep down, he knew something wasn't right. And for the first time in his life, Braden Cole, genius, untouchable, was haunted, not by guilt, not by greed, but by not knowing. He launched quiet searches, no names, just descriptions. Blonde, early 30s, worked at Bridgewater Library for 5 years. No records, no leads. It was like she never existed. Until one day, while passing her usual shelf, he noticed something strange. A gap in the books, a space where one paperback was missing, and inside that space, tucked between dusty spines, was a photograph. Old, worn, folded, a picture of her, smiling, standing in front of a weathered cabin with an elderly woman. Handwritten on the back, "Home is where she taught me to disappear." That was the moment Braden realized she didn't vanish. She left on purpose. And suddenly, he wasn't just watching anymore. He was chasing a ghost. Braden Cole wasn't used to being ignored by the world. If he made a call, people answered. If he moved, the earth shifted. But now, he was chasing a photograph through shadows, through silence, through stories never written. He scanned the image again and again. The trees, the mountains, the wooden trim of the cabin in the background. He'd seen those ridgelines before, somewhere upstate, Adirondack territory, rural, forgotten, unmapped, the kind of place someone went if they didn't want to be found. And suddenly, that one sentence on the back of the photo echoed louder than any board meeting he'd ever attended. "Home is where she taught me to disappear." So Braden vanished too. He canceled meetings, shut off his phone, left New York behind, in a black SUV with no plates and only one destination, nowhere. He didn't bring bodyguards, didn't wear his usual Tom Ford suit, just jeans, a jacket, and a mind full of questions. For days, he drove past sleepy towns and rusting gas stations, stopped at old diners, showed the photo quietly to locals. Seen her, he'd ask not with words, but with his eyes. Most said no. Some stared too long before turning away. But one gas station clerk, an old man with tobacco-stained fingers, squinted at the picture and mumbled, "Looks like the Matthews girl. Lived up near Deer Ridge, way off grid." Braden didn't wait for details. He drove fast. The roads turned to gravel. Gravel turned to dirt. And by the time he reached the bend with the broken fence and the mailbox dangling by a nail, he saw it. The cabin, same as the photo, but the porch was empty, the windows shuttered. Nature had started reclaiming what man had built. He stepped out. Cold air bit his face. Leaves crunched beneath his boots. Braden stood at the door, but didn't knock. He couldn't, because for the first time in years, he was afraid. Not of rejection, not of looking foolish. He was afraid of the truth. What if she didn't want to be found? What if the version of her he carried in his mind was just a dream, a librarian he'd romanticized to escape his own emptiness? He circled the cabin, noticed the garden long overgrown, a swing dangling from a crooked tree, and then behind the house he found it, a bench, facing the forest. Carved initials, LM and EM. She had a past, a family, someone who raised her here, maybe taught her to be invisible, someone she left behind, or buried. He sat for hours, just breathing the air she once breathed. Then, as the sun dipped below the pines, he noticed something strange beneath the bench. A wooden box half buried in moss and dirt. Inside, a folded map of the Appalachian Trail, a pressed flower, and a single library card. Lena Matthews, staff. His heart dropped. She had a name now, Lena, and a direction. Because scrawled in the corner of the map, right over a small town named Ash Hollow, were 3 haunting words. Start again here. Ash Hollow wasn't on most maps. It was the kind of place where the past hung heavier than the fog, and the silence wasn't peaceful, it was watchful. Braden Cole arrived just after sunrise. Alone, tired, and still carrying that photograph like it was oxygen. The town was small to small. 1 gas pump, 1 diner, a grocery store that hadn't updated its signs since the 80s, but it was the eyes that told him everything. The moment he stepped out of the car, heads turned, conversations stopped. Old men stared from porches. A waitress paused while cleaning a window. Children tugged at their parents' sleeves. Braden was used to attention, but this wasn't admiration. It was suspicion. Like the town had seen too much already and wanted no more strangers stirring the dust. He didn't speak, just walked. The photo in his pocket. The map burned into his mind. He headed toward the post office. It was closed, but a community board outside caught his eye. Yellowing flyers, hand-drawn signs, and there she was, a small flyer, blurry photo, same soft eyes. Have you seen Lena Matthews? Dated 2 years ago. 2 years, she hadn't just disappeared from the library. She'd disappeared from this town. And clearly someone still remembered. He stepped back, looked around. Then, behind the grocery store, he noticed a narrow path through the trees. Worn, hidden. His instincts kicked. The same instincts that had made him billions in mergers and markets. Something was back there. He followed the trail. The forest grew thick, but he moved fast. Half a mile in, the trees opened to a clearing and an old weathered chapel sat, crooked under the weight of time. Vines had climbed its frame. The bell was cracked, but candles still sat on the steps. Fresh ones. Someone still came here. He stepped inside. The air was thick with dust and memory. And in the back corner, beneath a stained glass window, he saw a wall of photographs, dozens of them, all of Lena, reading, smiling, sitting on that same bench from the cabin. Pictures of her with an older woman, with children, laughing. Someone had documented her life. Obsessively. His heart raced. There, beneath the photos, sat a box labeled, "In case someone comes looking." Inside, a notebook, a necklace with a tiny locket, and a letter, addressed to whoever follows the trail. He opened it. The handwriting was neat, familiar. "If you're reading this, you must have cared. I'm sorry for leaving no answers. I didn't mean to vanish. But this town, it held too much pain. And some people don't want to be remembered. I wasn't running from someone. I was running from who I was forced to become. Don't try to save me. Just know I was more alive in that quiet library than I ever was in this town. I hope you find what you're really chasing." The letter ended with initials. L.M. Braden sat down. For years, he thought she was running from the world. But now, it was clear. She had been running from this town, from Ash Hollow. And yet someone here wasn't ready to let her go. Because, behind the chapel, half hidden in the dirt, were fresh footprints. Someone had just been here, and they were still watching. Braden Cole stood in the chapel's shadow, the letter still shaking in his hands. He wasn't used to feeling this kind of tension, emotional, not corporate. But this was no boardroom. This was grief, regret, and something else. Danger. The footprints behind the chapel weren't old. Fresh mud, clear heel marks. Someone had been watching him. He followed the tracks cautiously, eyes scanning the tree line. That's when he heard the low, rumbling growl of an engine. And there it was, a red pickup truck, parked just beyond the clearing. Rusted but running. Someone was inside. He approached slowly, heart hammering against ribs. But before he could speak or knock, the door creaked open. A woman stepped out. Older, weathered face. Deep eyes that looked like they'd seen everything twice. She didn't flinch when she saw him. Instead, she stared long and hard like she already knew who he was. No introductions. No small talk. She just said, quietly, "You don't belong here." Braden said nothing. He didn't need to. She glanced toward the chapel behind him and nodded once, knowingly. "You found her things." Figured someone would. Eventually, he studied her. Something about her face looked familiar. Not her features, but her energy. And then he saw it. The same locket around her neck. A match to the one in the box. She noticed his eyes. "That was my sister," she said softly. Lena. A shock hit him harder than any business loss ever had. This woman was family. She walked past him, opened the chapel door, and stood inside for a moment. Then turned back. "I told her not to come back here. This place chews people up and spits out what's left." But she had this idea she could fix what was broken. Braden stepped forward. "I'm not here to fix anything," he said. "I just want to know why." Her eyes narrowed. Why she left the library. A bitter smile. She didn't leave it. She was forced out. And then the story unfolded. Ash Hollow had secrets. Ugly ones. Lena had returned after years away to care for their dying mother. But the town never forgave her for leaving. For speaking out, she tried to stay quiet, tried to rebuild. But old wounds bleed loud in small towns. One night, her cabin was broken into, books burned, messages carved into her front door. Traitor, which disappear again. She never filed a report. She just packed up and walked away, disappeared before the hate could finish what it started. Braden felt something twist in his gut. All those Thursdays, all those times he watched her, thinking she was peaceful, content, untouched by the noise of the world. She was hiding. Even then, she chose quiet, her sister said, not because she wanted to be alone, but because she was tired of being hurt. Then she turned to him again. I don't know who you are, but if you followed her this far, maybe you're the first person who actually saw her. Braden didn't speak, couldn't. Instead, the woman handed him something, a sealed envelope. She left this in the box. Said to give it to the one who stayed. He opened it later. In the truck, alone. Inside was a Polaroid. The library, that quiet corner on the second floor, and on the back, a single line written in ink. I saw you too. Braden sat there for a long time, not moving, not breathing, because in a life filled with noise, that one sentence was the loudest thing he'd ever heard. The rain came that night. Not soft or cleansing, but loud, violent. The kind that shakes trees to their roots and floods the cracks you didn't know existed. Braden Cole sat alone in a motel outside Ash Hollow. The letter, still in his hand. I saw you too. 5 words. That was all she left him. Not an address, not a promise, not a way forward. Just recognition. For a man like Braden, who had always existed in spaces where people wanted something from him, money, power, opportunity, this was the first time someone had simply acknowledged him. For being there, it should have been enough. But it wasn't. Because somewhere out in that storm, Lena Matthews was still out there. And he wasn't leaving until he found her. He spent the next day retracing everything. He revisited the chapel, walked the trail again, looked for signs, footprints, broken branches, anything. And that's when he saw it. A tree, split from the lightning the night before, and tucked in its roots. Something glinting in the mud, a silver bracelet. Delicate, engraved, EM2LM. Keep going. He knew instantly this was her mother's. The initials matched those carved in the bench back at the cabin. But the location, it didn't make sense. This wasn't near the chapel. This was on a slope that curved toward the mountains. Toward the trail. He opened the map again, the one she'd left in the box, and for the first time, he noticed the faint dotted line that extended beyond Ash Hollow. A hidden branch of the Appalachian Trail, marked only by a red X, no words, no clue. Just X. And in Braden's world, X always marked one thing, something worth chasing. He packed that night, told no one, and by morning, he was following the trail alone into the woods, guided by intuition and a woman's memory. For hours, he hiked in silence. The forest thickened, the air changed. It wasn't just geography anymore, it was intentional isolation. Someone wanted to disappear here, and then, just before dusk, he saw it. A small, moss-covered shack tucked between towering pines. Not the kind you find on maps, the kind you only see if you're meant to. No lights, no smoke, just stillness. He approached slowly, every part of him screaming that this was it. He knocked once, no answer, but on the windowsill, inside a mason jar, was something that made his heart stop. A bookmark, with the library's logo, and on the back, scribbled in that same handwriting, not lost, just ... away. He stepped back, looked around. No footprints, no sound, only the whisper of wind through trees. She had been here. Recently, and maybe still was. He didn't go inside. He didn't try to open the door. For the first time, Braden realized, maybe this wasn't about finding her. Maybe it was about understanding why she didn't want to be found. So, he did something he hadn't done in years. He sat on the steps and waited, not to claim, not to convince, just to be near her silence again. As the sun dipped behind the treetops and dusk painted the world in shadows, a soft sound echoed through the woods, leaves crunching. Slow, careful, intentional. And then, a figure stepped through the trees. Blonde, worn backpack, eyes wide with disbelief. Lena Matthews. For a moment, the forest held its breath. She stood just inside the tree line, blonde hair tied back, a canvas bag slung over her shoulder, boots worn from miles. No makeup, no mask. Just her. Lena Matthews. In Braden Coleman of skyscrapers and strategies, had frozen on the steps of a shack that didn't belong to him, in a world that never played by his rules. She didn't run, she didn't cry, she didn't speak. Instead, she just looked at him like a question that had never been asked, and an answer that didn't need to be said. He stood slowly. No movement beyond that. No reaching. No claiming, because this woman, this quiet librarian, he'd watched from a distance for years, was never his to have, only to understand. She walked past him, calm, measured up the steps, unlocked the door. He didn't follow. He couldn't. She paused at the doorway, glanced back with a soft tilt of her head, and then stepped inside. The door remained open. Just slightly, a crack wide enough to say, "You can sit with me, but not too close." Braden stayed on the porch, sat again, hands in his lap, heart loud in his chest, and for the next hour, they existed like that. Two people, two paths, no paths, number, future, just this. The shack was quiet inside. No noise, no light. But through the open window, he heard the gentle sound of pages turning. She was reading. Still, reading. A soft wind passed between them, rustling the trees like a whispered apology from the universe. And that's when Braden understood. He didn't come here to bring her back. He came here to let her be. She wasn't a mystery to solve. She wasn't a reward for persistence. She was a story already written, in her own ink, on her own time, and he was just a footnote. A man who had everything but once a week traded the world for a second-floor library seat because a quiet woman with a quiet life made the noise in his soul go still. He stood up. One last look. The locket still in his pocket. Her letter in his jacket. Then he left. No goodbye. No promises. Just a silent step back into the woods. Back into a world that would never know her name. Never know her story. Never understand how a billionaire with all the power on earth was brought to his knees by the woman he never touched. Weeks passed. Back in the city. The library stayed open. He went once more, sat in the corner seat. The new librarian smiled politely. But that corner no longer held her shadow. And yet, he didn't feel empty, because now, when Braden Cole closed his eyes, he didn't see spreadsheets. He saw sunlight, filtering through pine trees, a locket in the dirt, a shack that held silence, and a woman who once turned, just slightly, at the sound of his breath, and didn't run. Some people vanish. Others just return to themselves, and the richest man in New York. He finally learned, sometimes you don't chase love, you wait for it, and sometimes, you let it go. Some stories aren't about endings. They're about what we learn when someone walks away and we finally stop chasing the world to find ourselves. If this story moved you, leave a comment. Tell us what you would have done. And if you want more stories like this raw, real, and unforgettable, hit subscribe. Because some tales, they stay with you long after the screen fades to black.